The pastors have been preaching through the book of Genesis, and we have seen the difficulties between the twin brothers Jacob and Esau, and how Esau had stolen Jacob's birthright and his father's blessing. Jacob has been a man on the run, running from God and from Esau. And chapter 32 tells the story of the brothers' encounter. Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. When Jacob saw them, he said, "This is the camp of God." So he named that place Mahanaim. Jacob sent messengers ahead of him to his brother Esau in the land of Seir, the country of Edom. He instructed them, "This is what you are to say to my master Esau. Your servant Jacob says, I have been staying with Laban and have remained there till now. I have cattle and donkeys, sheep and goats, men servants and maid servants. And now I am sending this message to you, my lord, that I may find favor in your eyes." When the messengers returned to Jacob, they said, "We went to your brother Esau, and now he is coming to meet you, and 400 men are with him." In great fear and distress, Jacob divided the people who were with him into two groups, and the flocks and the herds and the camels as well. He thought, if Esau comes and attacks one group, the group that is left may escape. Then Jacob prayed, "O God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, O Lord, who said to me, 'Go back to your country and your relatives, and I will make you prosper,' I am unworthy of all your kindness and faithfulness you have shown to your servant. I had only my staff when I crossed the Jordan, but now I have become two groups. Save me, I pray, from the hand of my brother Esau, for I am afraid he will come and attack me, and also the mothers with their children. But you have said, I will surely make you prosper, and will make your descendants like the sand of the sea, which cannot be counted." He spent the night there, and from that he had with him he selected a gift for his brother Esau: 200 female goats and 20 male goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 female camels with their young, 40 cows and 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys and 10 male donkeys. He put them in the care of his servants, each herd by itself, and he said to his servants, "Go ahead of me and keep some pace between the herds." He instructed the one in the lead, "When my brother Esau meets you and asks, 'To whom do you belong, and where are you going, and who owns all these animals in front of you?' then you are to say, 'They belong to your servant Jacob. They are a gift sent by my lord to my lord Esau, and he is coming behind us.'" He also instructed the second and third and all the others who followed the herds, "You are to say the same thing to Esau when you meet him, and be sure to say, 'Your servant Jacob is coming behind us.' For he thought, 'I will pacify him with these gifts. I am sending on ahead. Later I will see him, perhaps he will receive me.' So Jacob's gifts went on ahead of him. He himself spent the night in the camp."
What a character we're studying, eh? Hard to imagine that Jacob is one of the patriarchs of Israel. In fact, the namesake of Israel. Jacob's name gets changed in the passage that immediately follows after what Delbert read for us this morning. What a turkey. You imagine. Just think about this gentleman here for a little minute. Delbert already kind of gave us a little bit of a brief about this, but think about this gentleman. Does he deserve God's blessing? Did he earn God's blessing? Richard has made the illustration a couple of times over the last couple of weeks about the power of the spoken word for the people of ancient Israel, and indeed on into the not-so-ancient Israel. And of course, he's paid reference to that passage in John that says, "In the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. It's very important to remember these things. There is power in the Word. And sometimes we miss the fact that there's still power in the Word today. And we need to understand that if we're going to understand the connotation of being a blessed people, of receiving God's blessing. But think about this for a moment. What is the power of the words, "I love you," spoken to a family member? Do those words have power? You better believe it. Particularly if they're spoken regularly and genuinely, they make the world of difference. You see it in a child. You see it in the family relationship of husband and wife. Those words have power. We don't think words have power. There's one of many illustrations. What about when you are as a dad or in the middle of a thunder and lightning storm with a little shaking, scared child, and you say the words, "Relax, everything will be okay"? Do those words have power? You bet they do. Why do they have power? Because Daddy spoke them. Right? And Daddy knows everything. Caleb likes, when he was a little bit younger, had his French teacher, had something break in class. He said, "Oh, don't worry, I'll take it home with me. My dad can fix anything." As the older he gets, the more he realizes that's not quite entirely accurate. There are things that I can fix, but for a little child, there's powers to be found in the words of mom and dad. They're so much larger, so much more experienced. But it's not all positive, is it? What about that cutting word of a bully who says to a young girl, "Look at your face and the blemishes on those face. You're so ugly." And it sticks with them for life. Even as they grow older and are able to overcome that, mentally there's still that little digging bit in there, isn't there, that says, "I remember that and it still hurts." Or that young, scrawny boy that hasn't got buffed out yet, that still is, if you're like me, if you stood sideways, you could have seen whatever was on the other side because you wouldn't have seen me. And those words of, "Oh, look at you, you wimp," they ring true, don't they? There is power in words. But don't think it's always the words of others that have power. You speak to yourself as well. You tell yourself things about yourself all of the time. Have you ever said to yourself, "How could I be so stupid?" I've said that before, right? Or maybe even, "How could anyone ever love me?" You ever say that before? And you can have a whole series of things. What happens as you say those words, you speak them in your mind, they become a part of you. There is power in words. And we need to understand that as we come into this discussion on God's blessing in your life and in my life. See, part of what Jacob stole from his brother Esau was words, mere words, right? It was a blessing. It was that blessing intended for Esau that he stole, robbed his brother of the right to. Now, yes, we understand that God wanted that to go to Jacob. God would have looked after that. Jacob jumped the gun, didn't he? So what is a blessing? If you look it up in the dictionary, you'll find a whole variety of things that are parts of this definition, and we're going to take just a few of them and unpack them a little tiny bit. But the first one is the act of invoking divine protection or aid. Lord, help me, I'm in trouble. We call out to God and ask for God's protection. We ask for God to help us in situations. We ask God to guide us and to direct us. That is part of seeking God's blessing. And if you're speaking that on behalf of another person, so Lord, I pray that you go with Jane as they travel up to this particular area. That is a blessing that you're asking God to give to those people. Probably the one that comes to mind very easily is the whole aspect of grace, saying blessing at your meal. What are you doing? You're asking God to bless the people that are partaking the meal, that are sharing that fellowship time with you, and asking for Him to be a part of that aspect of your life. I like this one, though, and it really kind of gets to the core of what we were talking about. Approval, to wish well, to get behind and to stand alongside of and say, yes, I agree, I am there with you. That is a blessing. Probably in about 50 years, a young man will be foolish enough to walk up to me and ask for my blessing for a certain blonde. If it happens before 50 years from now, I'm going to shoot whoever comes and does that. Not really. Well, I shouldn't say that. Maybe. What is he asking? He's asking not whether or not he can ask, because obviously if he wants to, he can ask. He better wait at least 20 years. He can ask Rachel for the hand of marriage. I remember doing that. Herb, my father-in-law, is just a little fella, but I was a nervous cat towering over him asking for that permission. Was I really asking permission? No, I was asking for the blessing. For him to say, okay, that's fine with me. My mother-in-law growled at me because I didn't ask her for the same blessing. That's what we're talking about here. That's the blessing of God that we're seeking. For God to say, yes, not only that, but I am there with you. I am standing alongside of you. I concur, I agree with what is being said, with what you want to do. Another one is to bestow divine gift or favor, which is also part of what is happening here. And the last one is not a communication act, it is a state of being. The last definition is a happy event or state of affairs. You ever feel blessed? I hope so. If not, we really need to talk, right? We live in a blessed country, and when we talk about that blessing, we're saying that it's a happy state of affairs. We lament when we fall to number 7 on the world's happiness list. 7 out of 6 or 700 is pretty good, isn't it? We need to recognize these kinds of things. That's the blessing that we're talking about. Most of these definitions have a sense of communication. They link back to the word, the things that are said. That's important for us to understand. And the words we speak and the words that we hear affect our state of happiness and our state of affairs. Let me ask you, are you worthy of God's blessing? Is there any one of us that is worthy in our own selves, just in our natural state of being, to receive God's blessing? Easy answer. One of the shortest words I know. No. Not one of us is. It's just the fact of us as fallen human beings. Not one of us is worthy. We cannot earn God's blessing. Now that can be a little bit daunting, can't it? It's also very reassuring. How many of you have tried to earn God's blessing and realize that you always, every time fall short? No matter how hard you work at it, something happens that you mess up. Doesn't it? You can do real well for a little while, and then maybe that thought comes into your mind of, there's so-and-so, and I can't stand them. Oops. I just messed up. Now I'm back to square one again. That's our first point for us to recognize today, is God's blessing is not earned. It's bestowed. If you want to see this in play, just think of Jacob here. Think of all the things he's done. Delbert pointed out a few of them already. He manipulated his brother out of his inheritance. That's fairly significant. How many of you have stolen all of your brother's inheritance from a very wealthy parent? Esau stood to inherit a huge volume of assets, and Jacob stole them. But that wasn't it, and Delbert pointed that out too. He also stole his blessing. And that's important to keep in mind. He stole those very words that his father was speaking to honor Esau. He robbed his brother of that. And that is a huge insult. I love reading how Jacob married into a very manipulative family as well. I think he got what he deserved when he married into Laban's family. He manipulated Laban out of a lot of Laban's wealth. But notice what Laban did here too. Remember the story of Leah and Rachel? By the way, we named Rachel after the pretty one. Right? There was one daughter that was not quite so beautiful and a daughter that was very beautiful. And Jacob said, okay, I want to marry this girl. And the father said, you work for me 7 years. I can't imagine if Herb would have made me do that. work for me for 7 years, and then you'll have Rachel in marriage. And then Laban did something. What did he do? He switched girls. He said, nobody's going to marry this first one because she's not as beautiful. And so I'm going to make sure that Jacob marries this one, and then I'm going to get him for another 7 years. I don't know if that's where 7-year itch came from or not, but you capture what's going on here. Laban is manipulating the situation. He is saying, I'm going to get you. In some ways, I think Jacob might have got what he deserved. Leah, unfortunately, came up on the short end of the stick, and if you read about the way he treated her, that also is a very dishonoring scenario. But at the same time, Jacob then turns around and steals his father-in-law blind. You see, he made an arrangement with Laban. He said, look, here's the deal. I'll work for you after this 14 years worth of work for the 2 wives I was looked after. I'll continue to work for you, and here's my price. All the sheep, all the lambs that are born with blemishes, they're mine. And all the ones that don't have blemishes are yours. And statistically, that was a pretty good deal. Except Jacob figured out how to turn the tide so that almost every sheep that was born and all of the very healthy sheep that were born had a blemish. And so all the weak sheep, they were Laban's. All the strong sheep, they were Jacob's. If you want to really make your father-in-law angry with you and run you out of Dodge, it's one way to do it. And so that's what's happened here. And so this is a character we're talking about. This is a guy that received God's blessing? You've got to be kidding me. You know, I think God, in fact, I know God, did this on purpose. He wanted to drive home a point for you and me. God's love for humanity is not contingent on how well we can earn or serve Him. It's not contingent on how good we are. His desire is for us to be good. His desire is for us to love. His desire is for us to be obedient. But His love is not contingent on that. Let me ask you something. What if one of my children was to do something downright despicable and harmful and upsetting to me? They're to make my life miserable and just drive my heart into the mud and really do despicable things that are very harmful to me. Does that change my love for my children? Now, right now, it's very easy for me to ask because mine are 9 and 10. Their scope on what they can do is fairly limited. It may be a little harder when they're 25 or 30, but does that change my love for them? No. My love for them stays the same. Now, does that mean the relationship is always going to be easy? No. Sometimes that can be downright painful. Does that mean that I'm always going to get along with them? No. Sometimes we're going to have disagreements. But the love that God has for us is much like the love a parent has for a child. It's the closest we can come, I think, to a human relationship that drives home that point. And the love we have for our children needs to be unconditional, just as God's love for us is unconditional. My children are blessed by me not because they earn it. They kind of weaseled their way into my life the easy way. They came when they were this big and so stinking cute. They dug into the heart, and they're going to stay there for the rest of our time, aren't they? That's the way God's love is for us. But we need to recognize here that we do not earn our blessing from God. It is bestowed. I want you not to miss one other fact here. Jacob's on his way back to see Esau, back to the land that he's inherited, the land that's his by right because he stole it. And just to demonstrate how kind and friendly and brave and dignified he is, how does he come about meeting his brother Esau? He goes in person, sits down with his brother and says, okay, we need to talk, right? No. He sends his servants and says, okay, you go find out what he's like. And they do. And he said, they come back and say the very comforting words, he's coming and got 400 men with him. And what do? He tries to manipulate and bribe his brother yet again. Doesn't he? Look, here's all these animals. Here's all this stuff. If after you've had enough of them, hopefully you'll be satiated and you'll say, okay, I can overlook this because you gave me a lot of stuff. But just in case that doesn't work, now what? Well, let's divide these into camps. I'm going to send the ones that I don't love as much first, and then the ones that I love a little bit more next, and I'm going to come at the tail end, and if you kill all the rest, then I'll run away. How's that for a dignified person for you? That's what Jacob does here. Even cowards and deceivers can be blessed. You know, I think this should be a comfort to us, because we need to recognize that not one of us has earned this blessing of God. Not one of us has earned salvation that is afforded through Jesus Christ. That is a free gift from God. Now, after we come to faith, we need to try, we need to work, we need to, with God's help, overcome our temptations and struggles. But there is nothing that can hold you back from being able to accept God's grace in your life. And that needs to be a comfort for us. And you know, one of the tools that Satan likes to use is he likes to look at you as a Christian now and say, yeah, sure, you've been a Christian now, but do you remember when? Maybe none of you have that happen. But I've seen that in other people. Do you remember when you did that? You were a despicable person then. You don't have the right to receive the grace of Jesus Christ in your life. You do because God said you do, not because of what you've done. Our second point that we need to get to before I run out of time and hurry through this is God always delivers on his promises. You can trust God to do what he says he will do. See, Jacob missed that point, didn't he? Jacob thought, well, I need to find a way to get this worked out. We need to trust that God will do what he says he's going to do. You know what you and I do? We're a lot like Jacob. If you continue reading further down, you'll find that Jacob actually wrestled with an angel of God. Now, what happened a number of years ago, probably about 500 or 600 years ago, if you struck the soldier of the queen or the king? What was your charge if you were a commoner and you struck a soldier? You charged with striking the monarch. You know that? Because when you struck an officer of the king or an officer of the queen, it was the same thing as striking the king himself. Jacob wrestled with an angel of God. Therefore, the Bible tells us that Jacob wrestled with God, because the meaning was the same. And you capture this wrestling going on, and this is a beautiful poetic statement that talks about how you and I try to make God honor his promises in our time. We need to be careful of not doing that. God will fulfill his promises. He has every time in Scripture. He's going to continue to do so. God is a God of his word. But you and I wrestle with God. Do you ever try to make bargains with God? God, I'll be really good if. No, that's probably when you were a child, right? We don't do that anymore. We're a little bit more grown up. Where are we? Or God, I'll freely and willingly accept your blessings, but only if you help me with these things. We like to put conditions on things in life. I still distinctly remember wrestling with my call to ministry and wrestling with that in relation to staying home with family and farming. And I remember putting in all these conditions. Bad idea. Don't do that at home. Had all these conditions, and all of them were met. And I remember laughing and thinking, that wasn't very hard. Try it again. We need to be careful that we don't wrestle with God, but we do. We wrestle with God when we try to earn our salvation. We can't. It's not ours to earn. We try to negotiate with God when we're trying to earn a blessing. Lord, give me all this stuff and I'll serve you. You ever hear anybody say that? Lord, if you just bless me with all these things, I'll serve you for the rest of my life. It's getting the cart before the horse, isn't it? When we live in the way that we wish to live while we're here on earth, and then when we get down to that last minute, then we're going to give our lives over to Christ. That's kind of also bribing God. We're not trusting his promises. I remember when I was in seminary, actually even before that, learning about the Emperor Constantine. And the Emperor Constantine was the Emperor of Rome. You know when he got baptized? In their belief, at that point in time, if you sinned after you were baptized, you didn't go to heaven. So when did he get baptized? When he figured this is the last minute. I'm going to get this looked after. And what that gave him the opportunity to do is live like the devil until he had the opportunity to come to Christ and convert to get the insurance at the end. We need to make sure that we trust God for his promises. We need to make sure that we understand that blessings are bestowed, they are not earned. The third thing we need to do is we need to trust God, period. Do you really trust God? Now, I know that we say we do. I mean, you look at the Americans, all their money's printed within God we trust. But do you really trust God? At the core of your being, when push comes to shove, do you trust God to do the things that he says he's going to do and to provide the blessing whenever he says that that's what he wants in your life? Or do you fall into the trap, like many of us do, of believing lies? Believing lies that say you're not good enough to experience God's love. It's available to all. Nobody's good enough. God gives that. But you can believe that lie. Do you trust God? Or do you believe that the God who has no limits just doesn't care enough about you? The God that can see all things is not there when you need him to be there. Do you trust God? Or do you sometimes think that maybe you kind of missed out? The call of Christ upon the lives of his people, Christians, is to change lives, to making a difference in the lives of the people around us, to deeply impacting people. God is a perfect Father. His love knows no bounds. But we also know that we have the capacity to let him down, to disappoint him. Now, thanks to the love of Jesus Christ who shed his blood for us, God still provides forgiveness, and he looks at us through the lens of Jesus Christ. So my encouragement to you is accept the blessings that God has for you. Don't try to earn them. They aren't for you to earn. Try to the best of your ability to live a life that honors God. One of my favorite passages says that God will not allow you to be tempted with anything beyond what you can bear. And then the second part of that is, but he will always provide a way out that you can rise up or hold up under those pressures that you experience. God's there with you. He loves you. He cares for you. He's got promises for you, and he will fulfill those promises. God's blessing to us is not contingent upon us, and we need to be excited about that. God's blessing to us is contingent upon him, and he's the one that can always, always deliver. God always delivers on his promises. You can trust that God will do the things he says he will do, always. And then we need to apply that to our lives, recognizing that if we are God's children, we need to act like that and continually seek to honor him, to love him, and to show through in our lives as that impacts the people around us.